welcome everyone to the second Havoc Demon Hunter Roundtable podcast here. We are very excited to do this because we were just given brand new trees literally minutes before we started this podcast. So we're going to improvise. We're going to work with what we have and do our best here. We have some very special guests with us this time around. We have Atrayen, who was on the last one. We love Atrayen here, so welcome back, Atrayen. Psycho and Shadarek. So if you guys want to just do like a quick intro, I know it's always super awkward to do that, but just tell the people quickly what you do and what you're all about.
Sure. So I'm Atrayen. I am the only Havoc Demon Hunter and one of the officers for Temerity over on Hyjal. Been playing Havoc since casually in Legion, and then I fully swapped over at the end of Legion and then started Battle for Azeroth. It's been with Demon Hunter that I've gotten every cutting edge that I've achieved, and it's really fun to be here.
For me, I raid and resonate on Bleeding Hollow. I moderate the DH Discord. I do a fair bit in the way of theory crafting. And personally, I started in BFA. I swapped to Demon Hunter in Uldir, and I've been playing it since then. Same thing, all my cutting edges are on it, but my experience has been limited to the last two expansions, which has been a bit different for from people that have played since Legion.
All right, and Psycho?
Hey, I'm Psycho. I stream sometimes. I raid in a guild called Big Dumb Golden Guardians, and that's about it. I've been playing DH for a while, and I'm excited about the new talent stuff.
Cool, sounds good. So yeah, let's just hop right into it. First thing I want to say is so we were the last in line to get our talent trees. It was delayed a couple times. And I think there was some negative side effects to that. It resulted in more time for the doomers to kind of, spread their ideas across the community and for people to panic. But I think we actually came out of it with the opposite effect. I think they had, more time to learn from previous mistakes and community feedback from the other class trees. And I think it turned out to be not as bad as people expected. Unless, of course, you check the Wowhead comments where, you'll see Kyle, the keyboard warrior, saying we should have gotten another 10,000 years because we need it. But hey, that's Wowhead comments for you. So what I want to do first is we're going to go to each person, and I just want your initial impressions in one sentence, right? So no tangents, no monologues, literally just one sentence of your first impression. Atrayen, you can start.
Oh boy. So off of this second round of tree, my initial impression is very interesting, very good. A lot of the feedback's already been addressed, and very incredibly good starting point.
Cool. Shad?
For me, I am excited about the amount of unique and interesting talents we got to really help our kit scale, especially, and that makes me really hopeful regardless of layout.
Psycho?
I think that overall, I see a lot of things that disappoint me, but I also see a lot of things that are steps in the right direction. And I think that's at least a good sign. So a little bit I'm conflicted, but for the most part, I'm happy with it so far. It's at least a step up from design in Shadowlands.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm super impressed at the turnaround rate of changes, right? We've had these trees for, 2 days now, and we've already had iterations of it. We've already had a lot of, not even just changes, but we've had communication with people, and it's been nice to have some back and forth and be able to literally talk to somebody one-on-one and be like, hey, this is happening with this talent. This doesn't seem right. And they're like, oh yeah, let's make a note of that. So it feels really reassuring that we have that sort of communication. So what I originally had planned here is we were going to start with the class tree and then move on to the spec tree, but that's kind of hard to do now because we don't exactly know what that class tree is going to look like. We got a sneak peek at the spec tree, and we kind of assumed just by looking at the icons where things were going to be. So I guess let's start talking about the initial problems that we saw with the previous tree. What were some of the things that ended up getting changed?
the first thing that they looked at least, was having momentum as a capstone, and they said now that they're taking glide out of it, which is going to reduce the power level quite a bit. And in turn, instead of adding something else into it, they're just changing its position to not make it a capstone anymore. So that's swapped with Essence Break in the new tree, which seems better because there was really negative things about momentum with where it was and how strong it was. And in turn, it sounds like Essence Break will be moved up in power to match a capstone. A couple of the other things we had was Unbound Chaos swapping sides, so it's in line with the other talents like Momentum and Vengeful Retreat Fury and Vengeful Retreat for crit, just so they're a bit more matched. And we got a couple other changes like Burning Wound going on the side where the Immolation Aura powers at least were. Outside of that, there wasn't too much I noticed, but it's hard to tell just through what we got access to.
Some of the other highlights as far as feedback went were that Fell Eruption and Netherwalk felt almost inaccessible to get to in the event that you needed to acquire those talents for whatever reason.
It felt like a real chore to pick either of those talents.
Yeah, and it felt expensive to have to go for those two things too. You were dropping something that you really didn't want to drop. It felt bad to drop a point for either of them. You also had, God, was it Improved Chaos Strike, and what was it? What was the other one? Trail of Ruin? Now I need to actually look back at the initial talents. Oh, right. Trail of Ruin locked Improved Chaos Strike and Tactical Retreat, which didn't feel like it logically made much sense. And then, of course, there were the comments about Serrated Glaive and Blind Fury being on sides that they likely didn't need to be on. They could have swapped places.
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning of that whole list of things. Why do you guys think there was such an outrage towards glide being used for momentum?
Well, it's just goofy, right? Like think about it at a base level, right? You're just going to be weaving in glides to keep up, like I mean, I guess they changed it because initially it looked like they were going to be turning momentum into like something like a maintenance buff type thing, to where it just, you could be able to extend the duration, but they went back on that, which is a good thing. But I mean, momentum is like a very unique talent in this game if you like really think about it. It's a movement based burst damage window, and there's really not very many, if any other things that give you that in this game. And to add glide to that, I don't know, obviously not everybody has access to alpha, but if you just logged on and spec'd into the talent and tried to play with it, it just felt weird, man. It just was really goofy. You felt really awkward trying to weave in glides in and out of abilities just to keep up the buff. It just didn't feel natural.
It didn't feel rewarding either. It was
Right.
just something that you had to do, and playing with it for like 5 minutes, it already started to feel a bit awkward, a bit annoying. I can't imagine playing a whole day having to glide within every 5 or 6 seconds. That would become tedious in such an incredibly fast rate that it's definitely very good that it changed, in my opinion.
Yeah, the thing that you were probably going to do literally just to solve that issue was create macros with Blade Dance and Chaos Strike and have Glide cast in those macros, because casting Glide doesn't prevent you from casting other abilities. That's what I was screwing around with last night, and it didn't feel like that was the intended way to play the talent, but that was the easiest fix and the easiest solution to just always have 100% uptime on that talent and not really think about it. You just press spacebar between your globals, and that would be it.
Yeah, I saw you playing last night, and I saw you using those macros, and it didn't feel right. Like, if that's the extent you have to go to just to make this new thing actually viable and feel good, that's not good gameplay. So it's good that like all three of you actually were able to test it, because I think one of the major problems was that like people just had a gut reaction to it, and they were like, no, this is bad. Like, just automatically ruling it out. But at least with you guys, you got onto the alpha and tried it. Even though you came to the same conclusion that you don't like it, at least there was actually some testing to it. Do you think that there was any way that glide could work? If they, like, is there anything they could have done to it to make it work?
As an off GCD thing that we just have at all times, and with the amount that glide actually forces you to move, when it propels you forward a decent bit, I don't really think there's any way that they could fit it in rotationally that would not, get a negative reaction from people pretty quickly. No.
'Cause a lot of the times you would just go out of your way to proc it, which doesn't. It's like kind of counterintuitive. You think about it, right? It would in most circumstances be annoying, I believe.
The only logical thing I could see them doing to try to make Glide not feel like you could have a 100% uptime with it was add an internal cooldown of like 10 seconds or something before Glide could proc it again, and that would still feel awkward because now you just have a weak aura that tracks when Glide would proc it and continue to keep it macroed in your abilities.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think that there was any way that it could work. I think it was a fair idea, and it was worth a shot. But yeah, I just don't think it was meant to work. Do you guys expect it to be replaced by Fellblade?
No.
I don't think they're going to replace anything in it. I think the intention is they're going to leave it at 12% that it was nerfed down to. They're going to let Fell Rush and Vengeful work with it. And they're just going to leave it off in its own area where you really do have the choice to take it. It's still pretty strong. The uptime is pretty good. And it's not as strong as like the Shadowlands version, but having it there for people that want it, or it might be a little bit on the higher end for min-maxing currently. So I don't see how they'd fit something else into it and push the uptime up without it just being, instant lock. So I don't expect they'll do that.
Okay, yeah. What do you guys think about the change to Essence Break?
Kind of what we've been asking for God knows how long at this point. We haven't had something definitive that allows us any measure of burst in our kit for 4 years now. We've been reliant on external power sources to give us that burst window that we've been asking for, between Blood of the Enemy and Marek Fang and Fel Barrage and Omega stacked Furious Gaze to actually get that opportunity. And then this past expansion, it's been First Strike, Empowered Hunt, and Frost Domination Shard set. Like, all of our burst came from things that were external to our class, and it felt incomplete when we didn't have those things. And when you have, current Shadowlands Havoc, where your Sinful Brand bot, it feels extremely bad to not have access to something that gives you a controlled, defined burst window when there are so many things in this game that demand some form of controlled burst.
So just for clarity's sake, can you go over what change was actually made to Essence Break?
Not really. They didn't give us too much to go off of as far as how it's going to be reworked, but the intention is that it's going to be a short to medium cooldown that allows us that, quote, controlled burst, if I'm understanding the intention correctly.
It's hard to say until we see exactly what they do with it.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't see anywhere on the blue. Did they say exactly what it would be?
No. It was mentioned offhand that it might be like a shorter window with a higher percent, and then we don't know what's happening cooldown wise. And the change for it being a capstone was just made today without any other, we didn't get any context to it. So that's going to be a bit of a wait and see. I'm personally hoping that they move it to something more like a 1 minute. Something that we're not just using with every single I-beam and every single window, because with our tree setup right now, we have a lot of buttons that are just getting thrown in on a 20 to 30 second cadence. And if you keep throwing more in, it is going to feel extremely cluttered. It's already pretty cluttered on alpha, but if you have 6 or 7 buttons that you're just mashing every 30 seconds, it's going to start to feel just not good. So I'm hoping it's kind of spaced out on its own.
There's also the risk that because it's a 20-second button right now, that you run the risk of having moments where you want to hold it, but numerically holding it for 5 or more seconds makes that button feel incredibly bad. So having it be a longer cooldown reduces that feeling and allows you to have a little bit more control over when you would use it, rather than just scripting it once every, 20 to 24 seconds before it gets really bad.
I feel like if it's going to be a capstone trait, I think they definitely want to extend how often that you can use it. And that's a good point, that definitely they're adding a lot of things in that 20-second window. I feel like it would be more awkward to play with Essence Break as it is now.
I feel like there's going to be, if you go the path of Essence Break, there's going to be a lot of stuff that stacks up with it, right? Like, you have Know Your Enemy, you have Momentum, you have, like, Isolated Prey. which is just gonna make your eye. Oh, that's eye beam. Yeah, you have like chaos theory, initiative. I feel like there's gonna be a lot of things you have to try to line up.
Which isn't necessarily bad. One thing that I'm finding a little awkward is isolated prey. If you're outside of any pure single target scenario, like you just don't want the talent. And the problem is to get down to essence break and know your enemy. If you're outside of pure single target, you have to actually take momentum, which kind of loses the whole. It was going to be your choice to take momentum, because know your enemy looks to be incredibly strong as it stands, though it also looks like it was changed to a 2-pointer, so we'll have to see exactly what it is now. And again, essence break isn't just pure single target, since it buffs up blade dance, and it actually does an AoE cleave hit. So it feels like you're a bit forcing a momentum right now too.
Yeah, just right off the bat, like I could see isolated prey and chaos theory swapping spots on the new proposed tree, because both Unbound Chaos and Blind Fury would be amplified in some way by the presence of isolated prey, but chaos theory leading down into know your enemy from tactical retreat makes a little bit more sense in my mind, because then you still have the choice.
A lot better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's interesting. So, do you guys see clear paths for certain types of playstyles? Like you were saying, the left side is going to be probably like single target if you go for isolated prey, or like how's it set up right now?
If I had to guess, you would probably lean more down towards the left side, and then you would float a certain amount of points to go into more cleave or more AoE on the right side. Because, I mean, unless you're going to go like full into AoE, which there are very little situations in which you would really, truly do that. Like, you're probably going to want to pick the most optimal pathing for single target, and then, you know, either go into Unbound, and then, you know, maybe you want some burst, you can get Fell Barrage. Maybe you want some consistent cleave, you can get Glaive Tempest. But, I mean, it depends also on, like, how good Soul Rend is, you know, in combination with Fell Bombardment, if it works properly. I think there's going to be very little scenarios in which you'll go more heavily into the right side of the tree.
Which is unfortunate, because the right side is kind of like, it has a lot of the new shiny stuff, you know, like Soul Rend is there.
I mean, for the most part, like there is like the most interesting thing to me in the entire tree is initiative. It's that, and that's like, you know, very early on the left side, right? That's like the thing that stands out to me the most. That's a really, really fun and interesting talent to play around. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that one. Are there any standout ones that you guys are excited for or that you're concerned about? Where do you stand on Ragefire?
Oh boy.
Ragefire for me is really exciting, but it is a really dangerous talent. The way the damage scales up as you increase target counts is just going to be incredibly limiting to how it can be tuned. And I guess that's if they care about more MDI style pulls than anything. But when you're taking it from a 5 target to a 10 target, you're doing something along the lines of like quadrupling the damage it does, and it builds up to a scary amount really fast. It's not currently square root capped. It probably should be to help, you know, mitigate that a bit. But it is a really exciting talent, and it gives us a massive amount of crit scaling. They also moved where it is, and it doesn't make much sense that they moved it to the left side of the tree to me, especially they moved it to where Burning Wound was, but they changed the layout now, and to get down to Shattered Destiny and Cycle, we actually have to go through Chaotic Transformation, and they added an extra drop down so we can get from there to Ragefire. So we can still go the right side of the tree and get Ragefire even though it's on the left. So I'm interested to see how that lands, but it also feels like when you're taking Ragefire, you're gonna need Know Your Enemy for the crit scaling, and possibly you would want to go for the Mastery as well to turn it into Mastery just to hyperscale it. But if it's left unchanged and you're doing massive pulls in like Mythic Plus scenarios, that talent can end up being almost our whole kit if it's not watched closely.
Yeah, for those of you who may or may not have watched the MDI back in Battle for Azeroth, there was one of the runs of it where one of the team comps stacked Unholy Death Knights in Motherlode, and you saw the power of quadratic scaling, and that would be what this talent turns into, a very dangerous and uncapped hyper-scaling AoE that would, draw many, many nerfs, and potentially not the kind of nerfs that would actually fix the problem and would hurt us in other areas.
Yeah, like we were looking at logs from me running heroic dungeons with this talent, and there was one. I don't know exactly what happened, but it must have just been a lot of mobs and good luck on the procs, and it was like my top damage by a ton. So I definitely see where you guys say like it has some insane potential that might need to be reined in.
I think that they will take notice of outliers like that, and I honestly wouldn't be too worried about it. It is a very interesting talent, especially if you think about the ways that you can play around it. But I think that they are better at catching, outliers like that nowadays. But I would definitely not be surprised if that talent gets hit with tuning more than a lot of other things. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be wary about how they could tune other things based off of Ragefire. That's a pretty good point, actually.
Yeah, because there's so many other things that feed into Ragefire. Anything that works with Immolation Aura and increases the crit chance of it or the damage that it does just feeds into Ragefire. Burning Wound, all the Felfire.
I mean, we
Heart.
haven't even talked about any means necessary yet either, right?
Right.
No, we haven't even gotten there.
Yeah.
Where is that? Down here. Yeah, like that. That is insane.
Interesting thing to Ragefire is it didn't seem to get increased by any damage amps. So Chaos Nova didn't seem to be, or not Chaos Nova, Chaos Brand didn't seem to be actually working on it, and it can't crit. So it doesn't double scale in any formal way, and that makes me wonder with the Mastery, even if it does Chaos damage, I have a feeling it won't get increased by our Mastery, so it would just get the single scaling off Immora, which still would be a lot, but I'm not sure that would cause it to be a big problem.
That's interesting. So the explosion can't crit.
No.
Nope.
If it could, it would be much more dangerous, especially increasing your crit by 10% would wield some massive results in how hard that hit.
That would be a big red flag if it could crit.
Yeah.
I think the only unknowns right now on the Havoc tree are Ragefire. Like, we can't really say for sure anything about it. It just looks interesting. I think Ragefire, Fell Bombardment, and Shattered Destiny, I feel like, are the only truly big unknowns of how impactful they're actually going to be.
As it stands, Shattered Destiny is pretty scary with how it's tuned.
Mm-hmm.
I got pretty limited playtime on Alpha over the last few days, but when you're going into a 6-second demonic window and you're leaving it 18 seconds later, it's probably overtuned. Once you're actually throwing meta, if you're staying on a mob, I'm pretty sure you could keep meta up permanently. It's just really hard to tell in, the heroic dungeons where packs die in 10 seconds and you're walking most of the dungeon.
Especially when you factor in the new and improved Cycle of Hatred as well, which is now giving you more I-Beam cooldown reduction per Chaos Strike on Alpha than it is on Live, which is...
We don't know that that's staying, though, and it also got moved to be right before Shattered Destiny. I have a feeling it's not going to be even close to what it was. It doesn't make sense to put I-Beam reduction right before the thing that increases the demonic uptime that much, because it just kind of overwrites itself, and that literally breeds permanent meta uptime, just putting those two side by side. So I have an odd feeling that when we finally see what that cycle is that's been moved there, it will not interact with I-Beam.
It's a shame because I'm curious at how they end up tuning Shattered Destiny, if they do at all, because gameplay like that is, and especially in this game, is very fun. Spending resources for a benefit is, especially if you can, min-max that to any extent, it's a lot of fun.
I'm hoping they tone it back just a little bit. Right now, it's just 5 Fury spent is 0.1 second added to demonic. So every Chaos Strike is adding 0.8. That means, in theory, if you get PI and you're running at a super low, you're at a 0.75 GCD, with the amount of Fury we generate, you don't ever have to hit a builder. I mean, you're usually in Demon Blades as well, and you just don't have dead GCDs anymore, it felt like. So you can actually extend demonic faster than it's like leaving, and then when you throw meta and you're throwing extra I-beams onto it, you're just going to be increasing your demonic uptime. But if they tune it just a little bit worse, like 8 Fury for 0.1 second reduction, then the most you're getting out of a Chaos Strike is a half second increase. And with the GCD how it is, that probably makes it fine. Like in most cases, you're extending demonic to be like 9 seconds ish. If you're playing on high haste values, or you're in Lust, or you're in PI, it's going to be a lot more than that. But it's never going to stay infinite. So hopefully it just gets hit with like a little nerf to be reasonable, and we get to keep something that actually is fun to play around.
Let's be real, we're not getting PI.
So do you guys think it's awkward that you have to take either Restless Hunter or Inner Demon to get Shattered Destiny? Because it's kind of counterproductive, right?
As it stands, yeah. Although neither of them even work with I-Beam Demonic, from what I was seeing on Alpha. I don't know if that's even intended, but it seemed like it only worked when I was actually pressing Metamorphosis. But yeah, no, they both seem counterintuitive with it, and I don't really know how they're going to deal with that.
Yeah,
Restless Hunter, yeah, it doesn't work with leaving demonic.
Yeah, you would get the Tharos charge, but you wouldn't get the Blade Dance empowerment. That's what I was noticing.
Yeah.
Which also means they're incredibly weak. Like, both those talents are incredibly weak on a 4-minute cooldown.
Yeah.
And they're required to take, which is not a nice feeling.
I feel like if it's going to be just for meta, they need to change the wording of it, because right now it says leaving demon form. To me, that implies demonic.
I presume it's a bug.
Well, if you read the tooltip of demonic, it says causes you to enter demon form. So I'm not sure exactly what is or isn't intended.
Right. Okay, so that's still a kind of a awkward spot in this new rearrangement of the tree. What else can we look at here? What do you guys think of Fodder to the Flame being in the tree?
It's the second most disappointing thing that I saw on in terms of everything that I've seen so far.
It's the most disappointing thing for me, so I'd be curious to know what Psycho's most disappointment.
Burning Wound.
Okay.
I think Burning Wound is the most unfun gameplay. This next to Simple Brand, extending your Simple Brand.
All right, we'll get to Burning Wound. Let's focus on Fodder for a second. Why don't you guys like Fodder? What's the problem with it?
My answer to that is just, you'd have to go play with Fodder yourself to really fully understand why it's so bad. If you've ever done any type of gameplay as a Necrolord Demon Hunter, like for instance, I remember back in the second raid tier of this expansion, where you fight the spinning eye boss that does the beam. What's that boss called?
Eye of the Jailer.
The Eye of the Jailer. So one of my demon hunters was a Necrolord demon hunter, because we were stuck back then, and I had a demon spawn while I was mid-air, taking the platform to the other side, and it just got stuck up there, evade bugged, and then went away. And it's just little things like that you spawn a demon, which is an RNG chance to proc, and as a Vengeance demon hunter, your Throwglaive doesn't even one hit it. And as a Havoc demon hunter, there's a lot of weird interactions where it could not chase you, it could bug out. There's a lot of really, really sad behavior that happens with it. I would love a talent that is based around getting a demon soul, but having to get it that way is not fun. It's not interactive, and it's just not, in my opinion, not a good thing for demon hunter.
I find it doesn't even make sense from I want to say lore standpoint, but that's not quite what I mean. Aesthetic standpoint, why are we spawning a demon?
Right.
The whole thing, it just feels really awkward. Having to use Throwglaive to kill it, really awkward. Nothing about it is really enjoyable to me, except for getting the demon soul, but you don't really have control over it. And frankly, I don't like Elysian Decree either. So that whole choice node sucks, because they're both numerically pretty good. We're probably gonna have to take one of them regardless, but neither of them will make me happy to have it.
I don't necessarily have any problems with Elysian Decree or having to pick between the two of them, but Elysian Decree, it doesn't necessarily do anything. It's just kind of boring. I think it fits like Vengeance very well and their toolkit very well, but for Havoc, it just is kind of would be a button that you press that, you know, is fairly helpful. But I mean, go ahead.
It does a really worrying thing with our class tree too, where Quicken Sigils still exists, but it's
Quicken Sigils and Demonic Appetite, yeah.
And Quicken Sigils works with Elysian Decree. It reduces the cooldown, so we have to go through a bunch of stuff that we don't really care that much about to get to it. But if you're running that as a talent, you pretty much are required to. And honestly, I think that's a problem for Vengeance too. Hopefully, if it stays, they just kind of remove that interaction, because I don't think it's healthy. It's been really bad this expansion. Like, Vengeance can't even take chains anymore for Shadowlands, which is just frustrating.
I think for the Havoc tree, just not having either of those buttons would just be, and to have something else would just be a benefit. Honestly,
I agree. I think it's pretty telling that so my guild also runs a Vengeance Demon Hunter, and the immediate reaction of the Vengeance Demon Hunter in my guild when he saw Elysian in the Havoc tree was utter despair. And the other thing I think to keep in mind is that if Elysian also appears in the Vengeance tree, it would feel even worse, because then it's just something where it could have appeared in the class tree instead and freed up the point in our tree for something more interesting.
Well, if I had to guess, both of these things will be in the Vengeance tree in a similar spot, because, like, you know, every paladin can have Divine Toll so far, and you know, every spec, I believe most specs of a monk can have Bone Dust Brew. So, like, things, I think that they should show up in the Vengeance side, but
I'm a little worried that they felt like they couldn't waste the abilities that were made for Shadowlands, and it was kind of pushed into the trees. But honestly, just taking the hunt and calling it a day for DH probably would have been the better call. We didn't have good Covenant abilities. They didn't link with our class. They were just there. And while a lot of specs got cool things, I think it would be better off not trying to force the ones that weren't good on us, just to try to, you know, fill it out to be even.
I think taking the hunt and placing it where Elysian Decree and Fodder is would probably just make the most sense. Because I mean, at least in the Havoc area, because does the class specific tree really need the hunt? I can't really think of a situation like where a Vengeance Demon Hunter would, you know, particularly care too much about losing the hunt.
Well,
it's actually pretty nice for them on sorry to kind of derail. It's actually a pretty nice single target defensive for Vengeance. It's a 50% leash modifier. Elysian Decree just kind of crushed out playing anything else on them, but it actually is a pretty good button on them, especially like Snap Threat and everything.
Well, that's a fair point. I'm not saying that it's not a bad thing for Vengeance. I'm just saying, like, I think it makes more sense, at least thematically, in the Havoc tree over Vengeance.
That's fair.
I think it is weird in the class tree because it's such a powerful ability. Like, it seems that usually the class trees are more utility. But I think in our tree, we have quite a few things that kind of contribute to power.
It actually depends on the class you're looking at. They are wildly all over the place. A lot of them have tons of throughput riddled throughout them. Ours has a little bit. I was pretty happy with ours because, like, I spent like 20 points. I looked at it. I'm like, I got all the throughput. I got the defensives I want, and I can actually toy around with like 10 points. And that's a lot better than a lot of specs. Some of them, like, the whole thing is throughput. Like, you can't take things that you want to take as utility because it's challenging throughput in the class tree. And then you have ones like, I believe, Shaman. They had almost literally 0, and theirs was like fully utility. So it's not really, there's no parity class to class on that. I think ours came out pretty good, all things considered.
I would have liked to see something else as opposed to sigils in our tree, mainly for the reason that I feel like, while as giving Havoc Demon Hunters access to sigils would be good for them, I feel as though it removes that specific niche from Vengeance. So I guess I can't really like make that comment without seeing the Vengeance tree and how it's all fleshed out. But I feel like it devalues the little bit of niche that Vengeance already did have.
It's unfortunate that we don't have the Vengeance tree available to know really anything about them.
Yeah, I'm missing a lot of context for what Vengeance may or may not have, and it makes it difficult to really provide too much feedback on the class tree because you don't know what the Vengeance tree might also be missing. It may be important for it to look like it does.
Okay, so just to wrap up on these two abilities, two things I want to ask. Do you think Elysian Decree will get turned into chaos damage?
No.
Any means necessary?
Well, if you're expecting any means necessary, it will. Yeah.
It should. Anything but
any of your
physical.
single school. Yeah.
I feel like that could be pretty powerful. The other thing is, do you think the fact that Fodder to the Flame is not yet implemented is any indication that they're maybe thinking of replacing it with something else? If it's going to be replaced with something else, what could it be?
I don't think it's necessarily telling that it's not implemented. There's a lot of effects sitting in the tree that, like, they're in the game in some form, like growing Inferno on the tree. It just like doesn't work, and there's a lot of things that don't work. I don't think it's that case. I'm not really sure what you would do to replace it though.
Especially where it is if it's tied to Elysian Decree, right? Like, there's really not much. First of all, both those two things don't necessarily make sense to pick between. And, you know, if you lose that, what do you place there, right? There's really not much indication to say whether or not it would be something else or would it be changed.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to yeah, I mean, sounds like Psycho wanted to talk about Burning Wound, so have at it.
Well, I mean, listen, I understand the fact that Burning Wound is a good. In Shadowlands, it was a good. It was a good legendary because it was good for damage because it paired very nicely with how strong our Immolation Aura is with Growing Inferno. Like, it had that synergy there. But the actual gameplay behind multi-dotting your auto attacks is not what you really want to be doing as a melee DPS. And especially if you're playing... imagine if you're not playing with Demon Blades and you're playing with... you're playing just demons biting a pack. Like imagine you're doing a Mythic Plus. Right, imagine you're as a viewer, imagine you're doing a Mythic Plus and you walk up to a pack, you put up your Immolation Aura, you tab target Demon's Bite on 5 mobs, and then you I-beam, and then by the time you get inside of your demonic window, your Immolation Aura is falling off and all the mobs are dead. And then they're almost dead and you're reapplying your Demon's Bite. It's not fun gameplay. It doesn't add anything on single target because it's just applied automatically on single target, right? So there's no extra gameplay or thought-provoking decisions happening. It's just a dot that you put up by either auto-attacking or choosing to put it up depending on a talent that you're playing. Yeah. And it's more oftentimes than not frustrating to play with.
Here's a thought. What if instead of it being a Demon's Bite or Demon Blade's proc that applied it was just any physical damage you did? Like throw glaive, blade dance.
Then it's just damage. It's just Trail of Rune that buffs Aura.
Yeah.
There's still no thought to it. It's just like, why have it at that point? I kind of feel that way about Trail of Rune too, but I know a lot of people do like it.
I don't necessarily understand the like for Trail of Ruin, mainly because it just exists, right? Like it's not. It's just damage. It's a talent. Like, it's cool. It it gives you a little bit extra damage, but it doesn't change how you think or play in any way, shape, or form for the most part.
I feel like it was literally just put into our talent trees initially to try to give some chaos damage scaling and mastery scaling to Blade Dance. That was my gut impression.
Well, I mean, First Blood now, if you read First Blood, it changes to chaos damage, which is...
That's the one I'm more excited about.
Yeah, it's interesting, at least.
Was that working on Alpha?
No, it didn't seem to be. They actually increased the amount of chaos damage we do a significant amount, and with how our chaos damage scales through Mastery is probably one of our top stats if we're playing for AoE, or frankly, even for single target with most of the setups. They really fixed like the ratios so that Mastery is not just flat out a worse stat anymore, even without taking any means necessary. So that's something that's really exciting about these trees as well.
Wait, Shad, you're telling me when I loot my vault and I see a crit mastery ring in there, it's not actually garbage?
No, you're gonna see a haste verse ring now and have the opposite reaction of Shadowlands. You're just gonna start crying.
Darn.
Over your keyboard.
Hedge.
So with that in mind, does that mean that haste isn't something we're going to be aiming for? Because I feel like we still need a decent amount of haste depending on what build we go into, right?
You'll probably get however much haste you need from your demonic windows and furious gaze.
It also depends if it's mathematically possible with any haste to maintain a 100% uptime on Demon Form with Shattered Destiny. If it's not possible with any reasonable amount of haste, you won't see that have hyperscaling. But if there is a reasonably achievable level of haste required to get Shattered Destiny and Cycle to give you 100% uptime on meta, then yes, haste will be a very valuable stat if you go for that build.
I'm actually not sure that's even true. I think, looking at, like, say, current DH, that would just outright be true. But we have so many different crit scaling factors in this tree that even if you could potentially increase your demonic uptime to 100% by running haste, that is less damage than just taking the crit and doing so much more damage. That's why I know your enemy is exceptionally strong, but then we also have refunds on Chaos Strike off of Critical Strike. We have Ragefire for Immolation Aura. We have definitely something I'm forgetting. I know there's one more in there. And when you're looking at that, plus you're looking how good Mastery will be, especially if you ever take any means necessary, it's going to just be incredibly strong. I don't think Case is going to match them. And I also think if you do have Shattered Destiny, you're not going to have a breakpoint for double Death Sweep anymore. Triple Death Sweep, maybe. Like, maybe there's going to be a certain haste value that you need to hit 3 and just extend Demonic just long enough. But that's also going to take actually playing around it from a building and spending Fury standpoint, which will be interesting. But I'm not sure that'll be...
Death Sweep's going to be 35 Fury every time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the Fury cost reduction is gone on that talent.
Mm-hmm.
Would you guys say that Shattered Destiny is going to be better for Raid than Mythic Plus?
I don't see why you wouldn't play it in both if it's current tuning.
It depends if they actually put the haste back into meta, because that talent's gone. I assume they did, but...
Also, I mean, at least as Havoc... I don't want to get into a tangent, but at least as how Havoc plays in Mythic Plus or Raid, it'll probably play the same way, really, because you really want to be able to do most of your damage in Mythic Plus passively while still maintaining like a good amount of single target damage, right? So like most things that are probably going to be good for one are going to be good for the other.
Yeah, and that's kind of been Havoc's niche for the past few expansions, is the ability to do fairly strong single target and then also have cleave that happens passively that doesn't reduce your single target, which plays into a lot of what these talents have on offer for us.
I have a feeling that haste is going to have a massively reduced value for AoE, just with access to, even though Glaive Tempest and Unbound and Immora, like, they have their cooldown scaled down off haste, it's not going to scale nearly as much as Crit and Mastery do, and reducing GCD really is quite limited in doing AoE damage, because eventually you're just adding more Chaos Strikes to the rotation. I think for single target it's going to stay high value, but with how low value it would be compared to like Crit and Mastery, I'm not fully sure that we're going to end up wanting Shattered Destiny for AoE scenarios. Kind of depends what they do with tuning with it. Right now it's obviously like busted. But I just could see other stats and relying on other parts of our kit now outdoing it.
Okay, cool. Let's keep just chunking through this. Eventually we'll try to put something together with this assumed tree that we have here, but I just want to keep talking about some of the nodes here. Where do you guys stand with having to choose Glaive Tempest or Fel Barrage?
I think it's fine. I think that Fel Barrage should be Legion Fel Barrage, but I mean, regardless of that, I think you have a choice. It's just a pretty decent choice. You have a choice between consistent cleave or burst AoE. Seems to make sense.
My problem right now is Glaive Tempest is tuned like a lot stronger than Fel Barrage, to the point that pressing Glaive Tempest and pressing Fel Barrage is pretty similar in damage, and Glaive Tempest has 1/3 of the cooldown.
I mean, I don't think we really can take tuning into account.
Yeah,
like
really, I like the choice. That's something that I like on the tree.
I'm hoping it gets fixed, but I have to take tuning into account after what they just did in Shadowlands with Fel Barrage, where they moved it onto competing with Demonic and Momentum and left it
Well, they
never
just
had
put
a
it there.
chance.
They just put it there to die. They didn't really know what they removed
But they
Nemesis
could
and
be
really
doing it
didn't know
here,
what to
too.
do.
Yeah.
That could be fair. That's a fair assumption
So
based off what they did.
that's a little bit my worry. I don't like the Fel Barrage doesn't really interact with her kitten anyway. It's really just a
Well, I mean, you can have Fel Barrage
Right,
with
yeah,
Demonic now, so that like
Yeah.
interacts that way.
Yeah, that's kind of why I asked, right? Because now you don't have to choose either Fel Barrage or Demonic. Now you can take both, and Fel Barrage scales with haste. So that's why I thought maybe there would be some competition between Glaive Tempest or Fel Barrage.
Competition between the two will depend on tuning, but conceptually the node is just fine as is.
Cool, makes sense. Fel Bombardment. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Obviously,
Who knows?
it doesn't.
It's
It doesn't
never
work.
worked properly.
Yeah. Do we like? Do we like the concept of it?
Yes,
I'm not
it's
even
cool.
sure what they intend with it. I know that it does increase damage on primary target, but it also throws separate glaives out. Are those also supposed to do increased damage on primary targets? Because I know they don't now, but I don't know their intent with the talent.
I don't think anybody's ever really known the true intent with Fel Bombardment because it's never really worked properly,
It's
and it's a
very,
shame.
It's a very chunky tooltip that doesn't give you the information you need, which is unfortunate.
I'd say specifically in niche scenarios, it could be incredibly strong, and it seems like something that's pretty nice because it actually adds a throw glaive into rotation, which, at least since I started playing in BFA, that doesn't exist outside of like dead GCDs or your author.
Throw glaive.
You don't press the button.
Throwglaive is a criminally underutilized button in our toolkit.
I have a button. I want to be able to use it and not have it be a DPS loss.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking if you take Fel Bombardment and you take Soul Rending and you have Soul Rending, designed in a way where it doesn't overwrite itself, because that would be a huge shame if your massive throw glaive put a dot on and then another one bounced to it and just removed it right after. As long as it's all working fine, it seems like it'd be incredibly fun for Cleave. And I do like the idea of playing around with it. And there's not really much, unless you're into momentum, to play around with Soul Rending, but I'm definitely excited to get to try it when it finally functions.
Yeah, because right now, for context on Alpha, the current functionality is that it will stack to 5 and then press
And then do nothing. Yeah.
anything.
And the tooltip does say that it increases the damage for each stack of it, so it goes up to like 250% for the primary target.
I think your throw glaive will do something like 5,000 damage when you proc it to every target that gets hit by the primary glaive, and then fall off for everything else.
I mean, even on live servers right now, if you pick this legendary, it still has bugged interactions with it that it won't work properly.
Oh no.
So like not many people will do this, but if you focus throw glaive a target or mouse over throw glaive a target, if you're not facing it, it will not expend the charges. Which there's very little scenarios in which you would do that, but I mean, it still doesn't work, right? It's just a little disappointing because it's something that I think could be really cool.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There's also one thing to note, actually. They, at least on our class tree, they added throw glaive increasing target count as a 2-point node. It actually hits 4 targets now. It hits 3 on live. I don't know what it was at Way in the past, but that is something that's also kind of interesting for its cleave damage, is it does hit an extra target.
Okay. Yeah, we can look at the class tree, even though, it was changed a little bit, but we'll go there in a second. Is there anything else we need to look at on this tree that got changed?
The only thing I'd point out is they put Relentless Onslaught in probably the worst spot it could have gone. It's right in the middle of all the AoE abilities. And
yeah,
where is that?
I wasn't exactly happy to see Relentless Onslaught because like it's damage, but you can't even tell when it procs, and it's still a bit buggy.
Yeah, I feel like Trail and Relentless Onslaught were both put on the right side of the new tree to just die. Honestly.
I feel like what's the point of Relentless Onslaught being there? To be honest, it's not like it doesn't really add anything that you would pushing a point into that talent. It's gonna be like, yeah, I can't wait to use this talent now. It's just like kind of whatever. It's just this filler button.
Does it interact with Cycle of Hatred?
In theory, it would. The
Cycle
problem
doesn't work properly on Alpha right now either.
Right.
there's a problem with Relentless Onslaught though, at least in Shadowlands, and I assume this isn't changing. Because we had the original issue where Relentless Onslaught would proc, but it could never proc a Fury reset. And it turned out the reason for that was Fury reset has an ICD, and Relentless Onslaught was proccing too fast. So their fix wasn't to reduce the ICD, they just made Relentless Onslaught take longer to proc, and it takes so long to proc now that you tend to get the Fury back into your next GCD, which also means if you were to get a Fury refund in your first one, and then you know procced a Relentless Onslaught and that one refunded Fury, your next Chaos Strike, if that's your next global, can't refund Fury because it's within the ICD window of Relentless Onslaught. So it actually just is kind of frustrating that that works that way. And it's like a 40% chance that you just have a wasted proc every time you proc a refund off of Relentless Onslaught anyway, so it doesn't even fully work with the kit. It doesn't add anything. It feels like I don't know why it's there.
It's a frustrating talent that doesn't really feel interesting or fun.
It seems like it would be an easy fix, though.
In theory, yeah. I don't know why they fixed it by making it proc later instead of reducing the ICD, but I presume it works the same. It's just really hard to test that talent.
Yeah.
You can't even really tell if it procs.
Something similar is happening with Ragefire right now, where if the final tick of your Immolation Aura crits, that 50% of that crit doesn't go into your current Ragefire bonus, like, accumulated damage. It rolls over into a new buff, and I think that's happening because it's, like, that damage is being calculated and being added after it already explodes. So I mentioned that to I submitted it as feedback, so hopefully that gets fixed.
Yeah, if they don't fix that, I feel like Rextroy will get it fixed pretty fast. He'll find something.
Right?
Oh no, dude.
The next Rextroy article is incoming. He stacks the heck out of it off of critters and then teleports into the final boss room of the first tier of Dragonlands, or Dragonflight.
Yeah, it also stacks off critters right now.
Oh no.
Okay, so let's talk about initiative. We're excited about this, right? Why do we like it?
The most exciting thing to me on the tree. First of all, I loved playing Mythic Plus in Season 2 of Shadowlands, playing around First Strike. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of different ways that you could make use of First Strike and play around it, especially as a Demon Hunter. And it's very, very fun to play with. And the fact that you add Vengeful Retreat into that, letting you to reset it, adds a whole other playing field of opportunities to play around it, it seems very, very interesting. And I think that's fun, engaging gameplay. I think it's a really, really cool talent.
The Vengeful being on it is where my excitement is. It's really nice just going into a pack, being able to like blow your hunt and whatever. But the big problem with First Strike, and what'll be a small problem with this, is like when you I-beam, there's not really an interaction there. Like I-beam.
I mean, that's guaranteed. You're not guaranteed to spec in the looks can kill, right?
That's true.
Right.
That is actually a fair point. Although also with Know Your Enemy, it does actually have an interaction now that I think about it, because with crit chance increase, a looks can kill I-beam does 15% more damage. But the fact that you have Vengeful to use it in different windows rather than just on pull as well is just great. I think that's great for us to be able to figure out how to min-max that pull to pull. And there's going to be a lot of variability around what we're buffing and how we're playing around it. I was very concerned that it was going to work with Ragefire, but because it doesn't now, I'm a lot more on board with it.
Yeah.
Also, I think the biggest thing to note with the talent is not only the Vengeful Retreat aspect of it, but you don't have to deal damage with Vengeful Retreat for it to proc, which is also a very interesting thing as well.
That may be a tooltip error, because I know the tooltip was changed on Prepared, the one that gives Fury generation. It also doesn't mention you need to deal damage, but it doesn't proc unless you do.
Well, they changed that with Momentum as well. They changed that tooltip. So, I mean, that's where I'm maybe getting the little bit of copium there from. But I think that's a big part of the talent.
I hope it's part of it.
So if it's working when you're not hitting mobs, that means it's flagging your character to be able to trigger it again. It's not like removing a flag off the mobs.
It should.
Would have to, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Anything else at the top of the tree that you guys might have thoughts on?
I mean, we can go over to the biggest elephant in the room.
Do it.
And it's the hot feet, man. Just give me my second Fel Rush charge.
Actually, didn't they take that out?
That's moved into the class tree now. It's literally the very first.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay, good. Good. Then I don't need to care anymore.
They took Master of the Glaive in the class tree, put that into the 2-pointer below it, and then decided to dump Hot Feet literally into that very top trait. So you just get it baseline though.
Okay, sweet. Okay, that's all. That's the most thing that I cared about at the top. Because I mean, look, we can all say what we want to, but we all want our second Fel Rush charge.
The fact that there were legitimately builds being speculated that didn't take the second Fel Rush charge made me very unhappy.
I mean, the first thing
the
first thing I did was when me and Evade sat down and looked at all the talents, we put them like, well, let's just pick everything that gives us damage, and we didn't end up picking that, and it just felt sad, man. Just running around without your second Fel Rush.
I resigned myself to just glide movement for the rest of the expansion. When I saw it, I was like, I'm taking the damage. I don't care about the Fel Rush charge enough.
No.
No, man.
I'm definitely happy it's back, though, and it being in the class tree is also helpful for Vengeance, because Infernal Strike, multiple charges is really important for them, and they can take it in the class tree now as well.
Cool. So let's take a look at the class tree. Obviously, this isn't 100% up to date, but we can sort of just point out what has changed. Let's talk about sigils. What do you guys think about having sigils as Havoc?
The utility ones are great. We don't care about Sigil of Flame. Sigil of Flame is just a bloat button in my opinion. Just doesn't make sense.
That entire branch is just dead, basically. I mean,
Sigil of Flame does less than like an auto attack in the current tuning or something
Sigil
like
of Flame is a very sad ability, and I had a hope that they'd either remove Sigil of Flame coming into this expansion, or they wouldn't bring back Elysian Decree and they just rework it into it. They did half of that. They added 30 Fury generation onto it, so you can use it as a builder. Doesn't have much value. It's just kind of like a single point you can take for that, but like, no, it's just bad. For me, Sigil of Misery and Sigil of Silence is an incredible amount of control in like Mythic Plus scenarios. Like, that is a insane amount of utility for us. So I'm excited about having it, but it definitely brings so much in that I could see us getting nerfed somewhere. I'm hoping not, but that's my worry off of us having sigils.
I mean, the weirdest sigil talent. Well, first of all, let's talk about. So, assuming we're going down the sigil side, and we're like, okay, cool, I want to pick sigils. So, the biggest point of contention for me is concentrated sigils and precise sigils. This little node, because in order to get to, say, you want more max health, in order to get to Will of the Illidari, you have to pick either of these two talents or you can pick either of these two talents that are most likely detrimental to you, if you think about it. Like, if you had a choice to always place your sigil where you would want it, or if it being tied to your target or your target's location, and there's no other way around that, it's just awkward. That is not a fun choice.
I was unhappy when I saw that choice note, and it feels weird to have this be the only way to get to Will of the Illidari, but you can just go around it with Lost in Darkness and say whatever.
Well, yeah, you can go around it with Lost in Darkness, and you're choosing either between something that is actively detrimental or something that doesn't do anything at all, right?
I just don't think concentrated sigils and precise sigils are really for people at the higher end. Like, there's a lot of people that play the game where those are just more beneficial for them, where it makes it a lot easier of an ability to use for them, and I think that's what the talent's for. But that makes me think that getting to Will of the Illidari is just not set up well.
That could be true.
I'm curious if they just don't want us to get that on Havoc, though, or we have to commit a ton to do it. There's not really much reason for us to necessarily be able to get it. And
I mean, besides those two things, the even weirder talent choice in the sigil path is Misery and Defeat. Because this talent, like, truly doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, because if you place it and you want to you're feared. So think about a real scenario where you would use this talent. Like your enemies affected by your fear sigil take 10% more damage. So you're gonna like fear a pack and then maybe like unbound fell rush through it or something. Like that's like the only thing that I could think of to where that would really make sense to pick.
And then
it's just a very
80% of the time,
strange.
someone in your group's AoE or your
Is just
immolation
gonna
ward
break
take
it.
is gonna break
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Unless it isn't. I'm not sure if it stays on the target after the fear is broken. That might be the case, but if so, it's also just really strong if it works that way. So it's either like really bad and makes no sense, or it's really strong and probably just shouldn't be there. I'm not sure where that talent came from. I definitely don't think it's healthy.
It's just confusing to me, really. I mean, the most disappointing things to me on the general class tree right now are the concentrated and precise sigils, Lost in Darkness, and Demon Muzzle. Like those things are just very weird. They either don't do anything, are like mostly a detriment, or are just confusing.
Demon Muzzle is like that's a conduit we have in Shadowlands as well. It's probably the most useless thing in the world. Reducing magic damage taken after, you know, after a sigil. Like if you're using silence, they're not casting on you for 8 seconds. Why are you reducing magic damage dealt?
The conduit in Shadowlands is only Sigil of Silence. Demon Muzzle is all sigils. So Sigil of Flame, Elysian Decree, and Sigil of Chains would all proc it too, potentially.
Well, we found a use for Sigil of Flame.
I mean, still, I don't know how much beneficial that would be. I guess if you could play around it pretty well, it might be interesting, but it's kind of a small DR to play around with.
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. Just being able to get silence and misery is great and like totally worth to spec into it. But all the other things around it, like the misery and defeat and all the other stuff that you have to kind of choose whether you want it or not, I think all of that is just, it's bloat.
Yeah.
And
I mean, like I was saying earlier, like I really like the fact that we're gonna have access to sigils now. I think it's cool. It's good for like everybody as a demon hunter, but I think it kind of devalues, you know, Vengeance's identity a little bit, which is a little sad. But you know, I'm not a game designer, so I can't really comment too much on that. All I can really say is it kind of, you know, takes away a lot of the flavor that Vengeance had.
I feel like that's something that's happened with a lot of the class trees, is that they were taking away specific spec identity. I'm pretty sure if I'm not mistaken, I think there's like a mana totem that you can get on all the shaman specs, including if you're in an enhance. And there's just a bunch of like really weird ones between classes that kind of do this, where they took things that were spec specific and gave it to a whole class. I don't think it's necessarily an issue if it turns into a class identity, though.
I feel like it's going to turn out more like homogenizing certain things, like they did in Shadowlands, where they gave every mage the access to Frostbolt, where they gave, you know, and like how often is a fire mage going to cast Frostbolt? Like very rarely, right? Or I can't think of any other examples off the top of my. Well, they'll give like all hunters that can steady shot or something like that, you know, like I feel like it's going to turn out something like that.
Well, it also could be that Vengeance is getting a significant enough rework.
It could be, and it could be a little unfair of me to
changed.
say. Yeah, it could be a little bit unfair of me to say that. So I guess the caveat to that could be that, you know, maybe Vengeance is getting some really cool stuff. So hopefully they do.
I'm hoping that for Vengeance, it's like it has a standalone reason to exist outside of sigils, and like that should have always been true. It had some pretty poor experience with like how it actually worked defensively, but with them getting access to blur and they actually get darkness now through the class tree, they at least have some more value there. And I'm thinking because demonic and a lot of the power is tied right in our class tree, they're probably going to be getting a lot through their spec tree as well. So I don't think sigils will just be like their one standout thing.
I hope that I'm wrong in that sense then, because I mean, just as primarily as a Havoc player, I still want like Demon Hunter as a whole to be interesting, right? And I think I just don't want like Vengeance's identity, you know, stripped away.
do you think Charred Warblades is going to help Vengeance kind of fill in the gaps?
I think Charred Warblades is too weak to.
Oh,
really
it's way too
talk
weak.
about.
Yeah.
It's basically 5% bad leech. It's not. It's nice. That's it.
Yep. Cool. Let's talk about demonic versus demonic origins. What do you guys think?
It's a really interesting choice that you never make because you just pick demonic, because it's just numerically strictly better.
From the numeric standpoint, demonic origins in a 4-minute window gives you an extra 10 seconds of metamorphosis, and demonic with no cycle and not counting for Shattered Destiny gives you 48. So it's about 4.8 times better.
It's literally just a binary
no
math choice. It's a binary math choice. They both are trying to do the same thing, so you just pick the one that does it better. It's really dumb.
Yeah, it's very silly. It would be cool if demonic origins was maybe tuned slightly better, but then how do you do that without interacting with a lot of the other talents? It's an interesting choice that will, frankly, if it stays that way, will never be made.
I think somebody suggested increasing your damage outside of demon form, like having a 10% increase or 5% increase if you take demonic origins.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do for vengeance then too, right? Like, because it's on this class tree, right?
Right.
Because like demonic isn't necessarily damage for vengeance, like it is, but very little.
Make it so it's like when you're Havoc Spec, you get X% increased damage out of meta, and if you're Vengeance Spec, you get X% increased health out of meta or something.
Yeah, it'd have to be something like that. Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what that talent looks like for vengeance as well, because right now it would turn meta into a 1-minute cooldown with 5-second duration, which sounds awful.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right.
It also makes it kind of hard for PvP too, because right now in this season you play both demonic and demonic origins, and you're in meta a very high amount of time. I mean, the other thing is the complexity of this tree for PvP, right? I mean, going back to what is it, Sigil and Misery, or the damage debuff.
Misery and defeat.
Yeah, like that doesn't really have any interesting implications outside of PvP. Like for PvP, that could have some pretty big burst potential, depending on how it works. But I mean, how some of these things are going to interact in Arena is a concern I have as well, because some of these things are staples to Havoc or, well, Demon Hunter's identity inside PvP.
So I personally hope that the trees are designed outside of worrying about PvP to an extent. You know, there's some things that we probably shouldn't get access to, like Blade Dance Dodge, while it was really fun in PvE, is obviously not balanceable in a PvP standpoint. But I hope
so
they
just
don't
make it not work in PvP. I feel like they need to do that with a lot of abilities. Just make certain abilities not work in PvP. I feel like it's very simple because Blade Dance Dodge was like integral to the class for a very long amount of time. I think it was very, very fun to play around.
It was a nice utility too, because on things like Piltagor, when you were able to just 100% soak everything on the last boss instead of having to leave it up to chance and fate that somebody doesn't just get targeted twice and have to burn an immunity and have to spread around all of those things, it just made it super easy.
If anything, because at the point, there was a point in Shadowlands beta where it didn't, when they took it away, it didn't work with Blade Dance, but it worked with Death Sweep. I feel like if they were to remove it, they should just keep it with Death Sweep and first of all, don't make it work in PvP, but keep Blade Dance Dodge with Death Sweep at least if you're going to remove it, because then you have then at least you have to play around it a little bit. You have to plan for that utility.
That's fair.
Yeah. Blade Dance Dodge, I know it's kind of a silly thing, but it's like at the top of my wish list. I just had so much fun playing with it in BFA, because I didn't learn about it until I don't know, the second season of BFA, and once I learned about it, I had so much fun using it, and I was so sad to see it go.
I always liked it in Pug Keys. You know, your tank falls over, and you can just get out of the pack, and every time you can go back in and cross back through when you're using a Blade Dance, because you just have that full dodge. That was something I really enjoyed out of it. Outside of using mechanics.
In pugs, like if I'm DPSing in a pug key on my Demon Hunter, which is rare now, but when I do that, if a tank dies, I still instinctively, the first button I press is Blade Dance and start fighting away, because it just gives you that little bit of window. And man, I just really, really miss that gameplay. It was very fun.
Well, I guess the other thing to ask then with regard to Blade Dance Dodge is, do we have enough tools in our kit to mitigate physical damage frequently enough that it doesn't become an issue? Because, I mean, I know in the case of Arena, like, if you're caught outside of your blur with a stun, you're just dead. It's over. You have no recovery. So,
I mean, that's our biggest weakness right now is
our
physical
defense
damage.
is just really bad.
Yeah.
Ironically, Desperate Instincts helps against that a bit. The health threshold is a bit low for PvP, but it does auto pop blur if you have it up in a stun when you do dip that low. So we have a little bit there, and that's something like we're just pretty much always going to take. You're not.
Yeah, but it doesn't
not
proc
dropping.
when it's on cooldown, right?
Correct.
So
But
it's
if it's on cooldown, you're already out your defensive. Like, even if we could pop it while stunned, that, you know. I find it hard to speak on PvP balance, but I feel like we got given a ton of sustain outright, which means we're just going to be very scared anytime we can't be actively doing damage. But from like a PvE standpoint, we are going to have crazy survivability right now, it looks like, so I don't really know how they balance that.
Yeah, it could get out of hand. Do you guys think there would be any world as Havoc that we would take Infernal Armor? I personally don't think so. I think that's purely vengeance.
I think if you were to...
It's a 4% DR with 2 points in that node.
The only real reason you would ever take that node is if you were desperate for Sigil of Misery and you didn't want to take the other things that lead up to it, and you couldn't afford the points to go down to Will of the Illidari. That's basically the only time you would take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I can't really think of another scenario where you would want that.
Yeah. Let's talk about darkness. So we have two choices when it comes to darkness, how we want to alter it. We have one that increases the duration by an extra 2 seconds, and another one that reduces the cooldown by 2 minutes. Do you guys like that?
Yeah, I think it's a fine choice.
I think you pretty much are backed into just taking Pitch Black in a raid setting. Having it on a 5-minute cooldown instead of a 3-minute for what darkness is used for doesn't make any sense. Like, increasing the duration 2 seconds is almost never useful. It's usually used for like a very quick damage window, and you can't stay stacked long. It's already...
But I mean, I also feel like reducing the cooldown, like how, I mean, even from a prog scenario, like how often are you really using darkness on cooldown? I feel like it's pretty rare.
It's definitely not on cooldown, but restricting to a 5-minute cooldown is a big jump from, using it every 3.5 to 4.5. Which,
yeah, I mean,
at least on jailer timers, that sounds about what I was doing.
That one depends, I think, on the situation, and I'm glad that there's a choice between these two things, but I think the choice of extra duration is not necessarily the thing it should have competed with. I would have been more happy if instead of 2 extra seconds, it was an increased chance for darkness to proc, so it felt more powerful when you dropped it. So in a situation like, let's say, Sludge Fist, when he slams into the wall, that cooldown is a lot more valuable for the short duration it gives you, or for...
I think that's a pretty fine line to dance, though, right?
Yeah, it's
because darkness is potentially a very, if you increase the chance, it is potentially a very, very strong raid cooldown to like avoid a big hit like that. So I think that's a pretty fine line to dance. And I think restricting it between just either CDR or, I mean, the duration is like for the most part pretty useless. Like you were about to bring up
like
KT.
A PvP thing.
Yeah, KT was what I was going for.
Yeah, KT would probably be like really the only type of damage event where you would maybe want to extend the duration.
The irony is you needed it on a strict 3-minute timer for that fight as well.
For the first iteration of it, yeah.
The duration also wouldn't have really helped because even on an 8-second, you had to leave for the ads after the spikes blew up almost every single time within the 8-second window.
The range could plan inside of it, but yeah.
That's fair. I just don't really see much value to having a 10-second darkness. 8 seconds is already pretty long, and I feel like Long Night is almost entirely a PvP choice, and even then it's probably only for like 2s matches that you're expecting to go fast, where you'd never get a second darkness. what I would have preferred seeing over duration is maybe something that dropped it from a 20% chance to miss damage and then just turned it into like a 15% DR. But it's a 5-minute cooldown at that point too. Something where you had some consistency to it. Because there's a lot of effects where it's like, we're taking a ton of damage in this window, except it's one big hit on everyone. And if it's not, slapped into a spirit link, it's pretty worthless. And that happens frequently, which feels bad.
Does that interaction with Spirit Link still work? I thought I heard somewhere it doesn't.
No, the value to that
no.
the value to that is just that the health is rebalanced, so the hits that you did dodge end up going across your entire raid's health. But
Gotcha. Okay, cool. While we're down at the bottom of the tree, let's talk about the hunt. To me, like the clear choice, the choice node below it is Unnatural Malice. What do you guys think?
I don't think there's really any choice there at all. They neutered the exceptionally fun Torghast talent or power or whatever it was, but I can't really think of any scenario where you would take Fey Empowered Elixir over a Natural Malice. Maybe like World Quests or something. Like I
World
can't.
Quest farming,
Yeah,
transmog farming,
So-
but like it doesn't even do that well. I think
Yeah.
the full Torghast trait would have just been preferable.
I can actually bring up a scenario. I think part of it's a tuning issue, and the dot isn't really long enough to make full use of it. It would be incredibly hard. But if you were to look at Fey Empowered Elixir, and then you take a fight like Wicket out of Karazhan from this tier, you could actually get the reduction on, what would it be, 36-second reduction on a hunt if you popped it near the end of the monkeys. And you could do that consistently each time, so you get it every second ad wave instead of every third. There's more times you could play around it, but it's mostly in like lower keys and stuff, and you'd have to intentionally use it near the end of a window, which isn't necessarily an issue because with initiative, you can use your Vengeful Retreat to get crit later instead of right at the start of a pull. But if you do change how you use it, you can get up to a minute off the cooldown, which is significant on a minute and a half. It just seems like it would be so hard and inconsistent to play around that it almost never would be worth putting that effort in.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound appealing to me. Even in a situation where it could be nice, I don't know.
I feel like
is-
9.5 times out of 10, you'd rather just take the extra damage from
yeah.
the dot, like, and just not have to play around that. And just, you would play around other things in your toolkit that would do more damage in the long run.
It does strike me as something that will be good for like open world content. So again, not really for people playing at the high end outside of like leveling or whatever. But pulling 5 mobs and killing them in 6 seconds is pretty easy, and then just having the hunt every 30 seconds for that is at least convenient. But outside of that, like for Mythic Plus, for Raid, for PvP, no, that's never really going to see play.
I will say that I appreciate the fact that the hunt is literally just a 2-point investment, whereas for other class tree capstones, it can be 4 to 5 points. Gives us a lot
Really? I
more
actually haven't
flexibility.
noticed that at all. That's a good point.
If you look at like Paladin's class tree, I think it's their center branch that takes a ton of points to fill out, and all of it is basically mandatory, so they get extremely limited in what else they can take. So having the flexibility is nice. It's just that the flexibility doesn't get you much because the other things on the tree aren't necessarily that interesting or powerful as far as utility goes. Like Desperate Instincts versus Quickened Sigils, if you don't take Elysian Decree, is for a PvE scenario a bit of an unfortunate choice.
This is something that, isn't really worth bringing up because it doesn't particularly matter, but I feel like I wish they would, in terms of the hunt, I wish they would change at least the like how it physically looks, like straying away from the Night Fae vibe from it.
Yeah,
a
give us Spellfire.
Yeah, I feel like it just thematically doesn't really make sense anymore now that we're out of Shadowlands. Like I think it's it's a cool looking ability, and I kind of figured they were going to give us the hunt a long time ago. It's a fun ability. It's a fun button to press. I totally get it, but my biggest gripe with it would just maybe change the way it looks.
At least give us like a glyph.
A glyph or something. Yeah,
Glyph would be really nice.
Illidan and Heroes had some similar ability, and I'm pretty sure that it's the ability that inspired Hunt having anything to do with us as well.
Yeah, and I think the animation of it still could potentially change. They might have just ported it over from Shadowlands, and they're going to come back to it later, because they do still need to add an animation to Ragefire. That's still missing something on the explosion. So maybe they're going to take a look at a lot of the stuff that we have that could use an update in terms of animations.
Yeah. Again, just a small thing, but I mean, thematically, it would make more sense. I think.
I agree completely. Okay, now we're looking at the top of the tree. So this is where some changes happened, right? We got Throwglaive has changed.
Yeah, the Master of the Glaive talent that it's at the very top, like it's the very first branch, is now added into, I think it's called Debilitating Cuts. It's way down in the magic damage reduction branch area. It's
old snare.
Yeah.
From Master of the Glaive, and they just renamed it Master of the Glaive and gave us that talent back as a 1-pointer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
is on a tooltip. Is snare a root or a slow?
It says snare, but it's always acted as a slow. As far as I'm aware, it's never been a snare, and it's always had that tooltip.
Interesting.
So that is at the top of the tree now, Master of the Glaive, and it has...
No. So Master of the Glaive is down where Debilitating Cuts is built into that talent, and then the second charge of Fell Rush is where Master of the Glaive was.
Oh, that's so much better. So it's just the default that you get that second charge.
Yes.
Perfect.
And assuming that's probably Infernal Strike for Vengeance as well, which would be very good.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, because this isn't accurate, building a tree wouldn't be, that beneficial for us. But I think we should do it anyways, just so people can see our thought process as we go through it. So who wants to kind of take over this and tell me where to put my points?
I think you, by default, click into Master of the Glaive, because it's there. I mean, while we're doing it as we assume it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, just Master of the Glaive, for sure.
Yeah, because that would be your second charge of Fell Rush right there.
I think what you do is, before putting any talents in, is you consider... I think you pick everything that deals damage first. I think that's probably the most important thing, because that's probably what most people will do, is you don't want to stray away from picking things that will give you damage. So therefore you would pick Master of the Glaive and you would pick Sigil of Flame.
You would go with Sigil of Flame.
Yeah, I mean, it's a button that does damage, right?
Okay. All right, and then into Bouncing Glaives.
For now, you're required to. So after that, you forget Imprison. It doesn't do damage, but you definitely go into Unrestrained Fury, and you can pick your kick because you really don't have another option.
Okay.
You take Immolation or a crit chance right below the kick, or to the right of the kick.
Yep.
You ignore Vengeful Restraint, doesn't do damage. You're kind of forced now to pick Disrupting Fury and Pursuit, because you want to get deeper into the tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
That should unlock Rush of Chaos for you, which you would take instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then I'd also take Fellblade and Soul Rending.
And
I also
Demonic?
feel like Soul Rending's instant lock, even though it doesn't do damage. It's just such insane value.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it also lets you get deeper into the tree as well. There's really not much else you can pick in that scenario. I don't. What's your guys' opinion on Fellblade being here? Because I think it's kind of weird. Because I mean, I can't speak for anybody who would really want Fellblade without Demon Blades. Like, what's the scenario where you would want Fellblade without Demon Blades?
That's weird.
They threw all of the fury at us that they could, and it feels really weird playing around having the amount of fury we do. That said, I've always preferred Demon Blades as a playstyle. I don't know if we're going to end up having non-Demon Blades builds just out of the sheer amount of fury we can generate. We don't really have dead GCDs anymore. So for that reason, I like it that we don't have to take it in our spec tree, especially because this is a button that Vengeance has also had access to, even though they'd never take it.
I think I'm fine with it based on how they changed Demon Blades. I think they changed Demon Blades in a really good way. And I think I've never personally never minded it one way or the other, so I'm totally fine with it if that's just going to become like more of an auto pick type scenario.
I think for us it just is. Everything that gives us Fury on the class tree just seems like it's auto pick.
There's a ridiculous amount of things that give us Fury, right? If you can like actually break it down.
Yeah,
Like there's two ways for Sigil of Flame. You could have Burning Hatred and Blind Fury. You can have Demonic Appetite. There's just like so many ways to generate Fury.
It's also Felt
It's interesting to bring up the Demonic Appetite point because that symbol, that icon, now does appear on the Spec tree for Havoc. So I'm curious if that is being taken out of the class tree and put in the Spec tree, or if that will remain there and we have some empowered form of it in the class or in the Spec tree.
Well, that would make sense because, like, what would you really have Soul Cleave proc Demonic Appetite as Vengeance, right? Like, I guess you could.
I don't know if I would.
I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah, that seems pretty broken.
It's so hard to speak on it without knowing the Vengeance tree, and that's the frustrating part here.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
missing context always.
From here, though, continuing down, you definitely take Chaos Nova because we need to get to Blur. We need to get to Demonic Appetite, at least in the current tree.
Yeah, and I think you have 4 more points that you need to invest to actually unlock that final section.
Yeah.
So Fellfire Haste and both the points in Illidari Knowledge.
Yeah.
Just because they're there and are somewhat useful in raid and PvE environments.
I will mention the fact that Illidari Knowledge is there is weird. I kind of wish they just made that something that, buffed wards back up, because they nerfed wards to 5%. So with wards plus Illidari Knowledge, we're at 9% down from the 10 in Shadowlands, and obviously, we don't have Viscous Ink anymore, so it's a lot more loss than that.
I think that us having less passive magic DR kind of is a little worrying because that's kind of our biggest defense factor, right? Because we're very weak to physical damage, but our one bonus is like, all right, well, at least we're strong against magic damage.
Yeah. Also,
I think
Jedith,
that
Reels is in your chat right now, and his additional addition to Demonic Appetite was that the bigger problem on the part of Vengeance is the 30 Fury for every fragment consumed, which I think we were mentioning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Vengeance would literally never be below 100% Fury.
Yeah,
I mean, that's how it is right now, too, and it feels awful to play, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that's mostly having to do with the interaction with the tier and Dark Glare and stuff, but...
It's also Soul Cleave is just such a bad button, but...
Yeah.
Hopefully that stuff doesn't continue into Dragonflight.
So interested in the Vengeance tree. Anyway, you have 1 more point that you need to burn to finally get down to that final section. So really, I mean, you could
This is the nice thing, right? We have so many choices, and it's just situational. Like, there's nothing we need to take, so it's like, you could take Consume Magic or Imprison, you could take the Slow for Throw Glaive, you could even take Increased Healing on the Soul Fragment, because we do have Demonic Appetite down the tree, and that's the health throughput increase.
Here's what I think you do. I think you are going to end up putting 2 points into Infernal Armor. Because because you want to get to Sigil of Misery, because you want to get to Misery of Defeat and Quicken Sigils, because those deal damage. So
yeah, and if the assumption is that Elysian Decree ever does become a choice that you would take, you definitely want Quicken Sigils.
Well, I mean, regardless of the fact we have Sigil of Flame, right? So you want Quicken Sigils. I mean, if we're taking into consideration, like, we just want to pick things that deal damage, that is the path that we have to take.
I think we need to look at the context of it, though. Having played on Alpha, I struggled to even find a GCD where pressing Sigil of Flame was worth it, because I was almost never low on Fury, let alone having a button that did less damage than that. It just didn't really happen. So I mostly was just throwing it before a pull going into it. But even then, with Blind Fury, that was irrelevant. So even though it does damage, it's such a minuscule amount, and I don't think we'll even end up pressing the button, that I'm not sure it's fully in the conversation, personally.
I think that's fair.
What if it did more damage?
I just don't think that it should be... I don't think that it should be part of Havoc's kit, period. I think that it should either be a Vengeance only thing, or it should just, maybe not exist, because, I mean, Sigil of Flame, even if you think about it if you're a Vengeance Demon Hunter using Sigil of Flame, you barely even press it off cooldown anyway. You basically just would use it to pull a pack in Mythic Plus, or maybe tag something with Chaos Brand efficiently. Like that's about it. It doesn't really do enough damage to warrant the global in most scenarios.
I don't think it does in any scenario on live. It's it's honestly, it's a very sad button. Again, I kind of wish they just reworked it into Elysian Decree, because it would have thematically fit the class better, and then would have actually been a good button. But for now, it's just kind of there.
Okay, so if we're trying to move through this tree and we're looking at it, I understand we can just go for all damage, but in a realistic situation, you'd probably want some utility, right?
Well, a lot of the utility that you would want is just there anyway, right? So like you're forced to go into, I guess I am maybe a little late on your stream, but you're like forced to go into Blur and Darkness, and you're going to get those pretty much, anyway.
Just to
without even
us down,
trying.
I think you'd go through Imprison.
I think so too. I use that a lot more often than Consume Magic, but there's obviously going to be situations where having Consume Magic is better. It's going to depend on the dungeon or whatever you're doing. But on the other hand, there are other classes that can dispel things or purge things.
I think Imprison should just be included in the class baseline, but I don't really think that should be a choice.
With, again, how much Fury we were having on Alpha, I honestly wasn't even taking the Disrupt Gives Fury talent. I couldn't spend it all. So I was just taking that and taking both.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
We could do that. Okay.
Obviously, Blur Dark.
Yep.
And then you basically
ignore
the hunt.
Yeah, you just want to get into pick both of the hunt talents right away.
And definitely make sure it's Fey Empowered Elixir, because that one's going to be incredible, right?
Yeah. You put 2 in Demonic Appetite because it's utility and damage.
Okay.
Heals you a little bit.
You take things for the 10% DR. So the talent's bad. It's DR.
Which hopefully turns into some unique choice node, but
yeah. Even if the other choice was just that it gave 10% more DR and you just entirely lost the auto-proc effect, please. That would be
How many points do we have left?
We're at 26 out of 31.
There should be 5 points left. So 5 points that we can put into any real utility that we would want.
You probably throw some CDR in Darkness. I'd probably put the Vengeful Slow and the Kick Fury in there. And then the last couple points, you probably decide between maybe going...
Oh, you need Sigil of Silence here.
Yeah, we want that, right?
Yeah, we Sigil of Silence, yeah, for sure.
That leaves 1 point.
The last point, you can kind of float anywhere. I don't really think this last point is too impactful.
It's probably reduced cooldown on Chaos Nova for Mythic Plus.
Yeah. That'd be kind of what I'd aim at, too.
Okay, this looks pretty good. So, hypothetically, if we were doing like an Elysian Decree build, do you think we would swap this and try to go down the right side?
If you're playing Elysian Decree, you definitely go for Quicken Sigils. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not really sure how you would go about getting there. I guess it would just be most efficient to work through Infernal Armor.
I'll put a screenshot in Discord of what I did.
Okay.
Of what when me and Evade were going through this.
Yeah, so you just completely dropped Illidari knowledge entirely.
Yep.
Didn't take Imprison. Yeah,
hold on.
That tracks.
I don't know if this is going to work. Hold on. I'm struggling here. Okay.
Which I think that we are very sad if we are given the choice between Elysian Decree and Fodder to the Flame, because I feel like you would probably be more pigeonholed into going into this Quicken Sigils type scenario.
I'm actually surprised that you took the damage increase on Misery instead of the half cooldown for stops.
I mean, it does damage. And I feel like you could make use out of it.
Yeah, like what is it, iron docks? You have those iron stars you can throw down if you CC a mob and then blow it up with that iron star. Granted, it's supposed to auto kill it anyway, but
I mean, the first thing that when I sat down and I looked at this tree is like, let me just pick everything that does the most damage, and then I can remove from there, right? Because like, you know, we can talk about utility every way or another, but like you want to be doing the most damage possible, right? And so that's just the way that I looked at it at first. I personally think that like a lot of the more utility picks and talents in general are more fun. Like it's more fun choosing between utility than it is choosing between damage spells.
absolutely 100% agree. I don't like having to make that decision between utility and damage. I like having the opportunity to select what utility I'm going to bring.
Which is why a lot of these talents coming back the talent trees coming back concern me at first, because you don't want to feel like you're with damaging abilities, you don't want to feel like you're missing out on something. But with utility abilities, you can feel as though you are making an impactful decision one way or the other. Like that decision is there with damaging abilities, but you're always going to feel, well, what if I had this here? What if I had Fell Barrage here? What if I had Glaive Tempest here, or Ragefire here? I really wish I could make this build work. That things like that. You might always, more often than not, you'll find yourself feeling left out one way or the other, or missing something.
Yeah, and that was the case with the Spec tree, because giving up something for Netherwalk or Fell Eruption felt extremely bad.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of why I took a different approach when I looked at my class tree, was because it cost so much to take the utility in our Spec tree. I just pretty much looked at it and went, Netherwalk, it's not happening. So the survivability we can get in the class tree, you need to take. And then looking at Fell Eruption, again, it's not happening, but with Silence and Misery, those are generally going to be stronger and like higher value anyways. So I went more for the utility around those and tried to make sure I would get them for Mythic Plus scenarios at least. And then using the class tree for the utility and just, realizing I'm stacking those points in the Spec tree, it feels like I'm still gaining out of Shadowlands, and then I'm not really sacrificing any relevant damage. There's little bits and pieces in here.
Well, I think that's like a very specific scenario, right? Because I feel like at least for Havoc, anything is a plus from Shadowlands for the most part.
That's
like
okay,
that's the main point with this tree is like when we first started talking about this, the main discussion is like, I mean, there were a lot of disappointing things that I saw, but at least it's a step in the right direction, because anything is better than how it currently is designed in Shadowlands.
Yeah, and I think that's partially why giving up damage for something else feels extra bad for us right now, because we currently do no damage. So we want to feel like we are getting better and not just staying the same, but gaining more utility.
All in all, though, honestly, I can't really find anything negative from that standpoint. Like, outright looking at it, we are gaining multiple different scaling factors through Mastery actually being good and Crit being insane, to the point that I'm expecting Versatility is just outright our worst stat by a lot. And that is way different from the last two expansions. It's like worlds apart. And then there's been like a lot of talk about how our defensives are getting ripped from us. And I'd say BFA to Shadowlands was a way better example of that happening. I think our defensives are actually getting better, even though Netherwalk is really hard to take. Demonic Appetite, it adds a lot of healing. Soul Rending, just having it in all scenarios, extremely powerful. We are gaining demonic uptime through Shattered Destiny, which with Soul Rending is, again, an insane amount. And I know that we're weak against physical damage. Sludge Fist was a fight that just absolutely chomped us, at least in Nathria it did. Every fight's so weak in the Faded raids right now, but if you really were to go back and do that fight with Demonic Appetite, with Soul Rending, and I think there's another sustain that I'm missing somewhere, but the Hunt Leech. It's an extra 25% leech on the Hunt as well. You heal so much off the damage you deal that it's pretty unrealistic that you need fat DRs to survive outside of one-shot scenarios. So at least from most PvE standpoints, except for like really high-end Mythic Plus, and even then it's a bit niche, we're probably good to go.
I think there's a lot of tools in the tree for high-end Mythic Plus, actually. Like, I feel like it's, at least in terms of defensively, I feel like it's, it's on the right track. I can definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, so before we move on from the class tree, any last thoughts? Did we miss anything?
Just one final point. This may or may not change, I don't know, but having to take Chaos Nova to get to Blur feels really bad. If I could, I would swap those 2 nodes. And then maybe put, Demonic Appetite where the choice node for Chaos Nova is.
The problem is if you swap those 2, then you can take the Nova upgrades without taking Nova. And I know
that's
Blizzard's
what I
been
meant.
really against doing that since people complained a lot on the early trees.
I mean, if anybody
Yeah,
at
that's
Blizzard actually hears this, please remove Fodder the Flame and Elysian from Havoc and remove Burning, and get rid of Burning Wound, please. I beg. Those are the things that I would beg for. Please remove those abilities from us having to be, at least if you're gonna keep them, put them in a far off place where we're never gonna pick them unless we want to. Because
I think that's what the new reworked Spec tree is actually trying to do.
that's good. Please keep Burning Wound as far away from me as possible and Fodder the Flame.
I have bad news if Ragefire's good. You're multi-dotting.
Oh boy.
Please no. I think, but I mean, without being fully negative, I think there's a lot of really, really interesting things that you can see on this tree. Like, I mean, initiative is really interesting. I think all of the things that Shad mentioned about the stat scaling is so important because it just feels really bad. Just our mastery just being completely useless for so long. I think that a lot of classes in the game need either different changes to their mastery or full mastery rework. I mean, Havoc is not the only one. There's a lot of different classes that have a lot of problems with how their mastery scales. And I think that they should really look at a lot of the different classes' masteries. But I think that at least giving us a way to scale with ours is good. Because at least if your class's best stat is versatility, that probably means that you're not having the best time, really. And I mean, I like the getting away from, for the longest time, Havoc has just been a haste bot that melees, and like you are just determining Havoc has for the longest time wanted other things to deal damage for it, whether that be through corruption or essences or any external factor like a trinket. Like at least speaking from, I think most people would agree that you want the damage that you deal to be impactful. You don't want your damage, 30% of your damage to come from nausea. Like you don't want that. You want your actual buttons that you press to feel impactful and to feel like you're doing the damage, not a trinket or not a corruption item.
Something that you have very little to no control over never really feels good.
If you look at a damage breakdown right now of Demon Hunter at the end of Shadowlands, it's 30% of your damage is not your damage. It is from an external factor, and that's not fun. It's not very fun.
It's from the Axe on Cash, it's from Fusion Amplifier, and it's from Sinful Brand.
Yeah.
I actually have one question for you just leading into that. Just because, except for Sinful Brand, they gave us every other external factor to our kit. If Sinful Brand was a talent, would you feel the same way about it? Because
the only problem with Sinful Brand is the Covenant Legendary. That's really my only problem with Sinful Brand. Is going into that playstyle of extending the dot. That's really my only problem with it.
I never really liked the original button because it was just press it and it did a bit of damage.
It's I don't think it's really. I would be fine with it. I'd definitely be fine with it over Fodder and Elysian. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a button that you don't really. It's just a button that you press. You don't interact too much without the legendary, right?
Mm-hmm. If the button is not defining your play style, the button is fine. But when the button is literally everything, that's when it feels bad.
Well, apparently, it's everyone's preferred play style.
Well, yeah, about that. Okay, so I think the last few things we can do here, if you guys are still feeling up to it, we can try to craft a couple builds here with the updated tree. This should be.
Oh, is this updated?
This is the updated one.
Is it on
Yeah.
Wildhead?
It should be on Wowhead. Yes, there is a blue post, and there should also be the forum post.
Oh, okay, cool.
No. This one is this one was like you custom made it, right? Just off the screenshot we got.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
You meant the actual
Yeah.
calculator. Yeah, no, this isn't something that's been made yet because we don't know what the buttons actually are. We're only guessing it.
We're
What
definitely
they
making
mean.
some
Okay.
assumptions. Like we don't know what Essence Break's going to be. We don't know if Cycle's staying how it is. I have
We
no
don't
idea
know
what
what the
Know
new
Your Enemies
Drogglaive
is
trait
200 now.
is. Yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely don't know what a good chunk of this stuff may or may not have been.
I don't
Yeah.
think that there's really too much value in going over this without like really knowing everything, without knowing all the implications. At least I don't know what I would pick without knowing what Essence Break exactly does, right? Because it could be completely
Mhm.
different. And I don't necessarily think that Essence Break, if it's going to be a capstone trade, is going to stay the same way that it currently is.
Yeah.
Definitely shouldn't.
No.
Yeah, it shouldn't, but I mean, I guess you never really know.
So the one option for Essence Break was shorter but more impactful, right?
Well, that was one of the things that was talked about last night. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily like a hard locked. It was just a theoretical. If you were to change current Essence Break, how would you change it?
Now that it's
Right.
a capstone, though, it might have to be a bit more, a bit of
I
a
think-
bigger change to really make it feel like a capstone talent.
I think having Essence Break empower more than just Blade Dance and Chaos Strike would be my way to change it. Probably maybe have it empower Fell Rush or something like that as well.
Actually, because it leads out of Know Your Enemy, I would like it if Essence Break increased our chance to crit on the mobs that it hit by 40% or something of that sort.
Increased your chance on the mobs, or increased your own sheet crit too?
Increased on the mobs, just so it didn't directly scale Know Your Enemy up to a
But
crazy
still
amount for that window.
Benefited from it.
Benefited directly because it directly leads into it right now, and that would make it work on basically the entire kit except for I-Beam with Looks Can Kill.
That would be an interesting change.
Yeah.
It would give the button scaling too.
Yeah, to an extent. Just based off how much crit we have, it would.
I like the
Like,
choice of having to choose between Looks Can Kill and not. I think that's interesting. I'm fine with I-Beam not guaranteed critting.
The one choice I did like having that we no longer have with this new tree is Chaotic Transformation. I was psyched that we didn't have to spec into that, but now we do, and that's unfortunate.
Very much not happy about that. That's one of the more disappointing things on the tree for me.
It's actually weird because I know a lot of people when they saw we weren't getting Chaotic Transformation, because like it's numerically it's just not that strong, and a lot of people liked getting the reset out of it. But the problem is, I also agree that now that I've had Chaotic Transformation for 4 years, I don't like it. I don't like that. I feel like I can't press Mudda until I-Beam's up and I've pressed it.
I think if they wanted to have that type of gameplay, I think they should change Chaotic Transformation to be like, instead of resetting your Blade Dance, your I-Beam, the next I-Beam after you meta does X amount more damage or something like that. You know, because it is fun. Like I totally get it. It's fun, I-Beam, Death Sweep, meta I-Beam again, right? That's fun to press. It's if you like think about it just at a fundamental level, it's fun to do, but it definitely hinders a lot of the utility that you can use meta for, because you always have that thought in the back of your head like, oh, I can't really meta immune this next mechanic, these mobs, or I can't stun these mobs without losing damage, or getting a worse demonic, like less demonic uptime or demon uptime. It's not a fun decision to have to make a lot of the time.
I fully agree with all of that, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess you're probably right. It would be kind of maybe a waste of time to try to go through this. So on that note, does anyone else have any things that maybe were missed here? Any wish lists for maybe the next iteration?
I've already gone through my wish list.
Yeah, aside from
It's
moving
more
Chaotic
wish
Transformation.
It'd be more wish removals, but
I'm still praying that Cycle gets either fully reworked or removed as it stands.
I
feel
don't.
like-
I agree with you, but I feel like if they went to the point of making it scale with crit and things like that, I feel like that's just staying the way it is.
I think it was mentioned that that's not fully true.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well,
Yeah, I
maybe I'm
think
wrong.
it might actually get changed. But yeah, I'm hoping it doesn't stay as is. It's pretty
Yeah.
toxic. That version of Cycle is stronger than Live Cycle, which is scary because we pretty much across the board people said they wanted it weakened.
The exact speculation is that, based off of something that a few little birdies have mentioned, is that it is very well known among the team that is in charge of the tree that Cycle is too strong, oppressively so, in its current form, and that there are thoughts about changing it from what it currently is.
Well, right now it's OP on Alpha. You just I-beam every other global.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting feedback loop because we currently have the old artifact version of Chaos Theory, not as in the artifact trait, but like a build artifact where you guarantee a refund on Chaos Strike when you have Chaos Theory on, and Cycle is fully refunding I-beam when you refund Fury on Chaos Strike. So that's just something to keep in mind.
I feel the need to point out, like, I actually like getting some I-beam cooldown reduction. I think my big problem with it is, like, Demonic is really, really fucking strong, and I-beam is only a 30-second cooldown. It's really hard to fit any meaningful amounts of CDR into that without making that interaction just broken. Like, if I-beam wasn't 30 seconds and it was longer, I would, probably love Cycle. But, in the circumstances we're in, I'd rather not have Cycle than have the rest of the kit changed around it.
I mean, I personally, my whole opinion on I-beam is I think it's more fun as a longer cooldown, like AoE ability where you choose to press it on a single target and not something that you would just constantly press off cooldown in single target. I think it would be a fun ability to, use I-beam as an AoE ability. But it's kind of devolved to that point to where, like, that type of playstyle where you're playing around Demonic and having I-beam being a, rotational ability.
Yeah, so
And-
you want it more of like a big damage ability than something that triggers like utility or triggers some more buffs for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
makes
they
sense.
nerf Furious Gaze down too, so I think with the haste reduction on meta and the haste reduction on Furious Gaze, that goes part of the way. And I-beam was changed, or at least the tooltips changed to be squared. It's at 5 now. On 5 target, that is an 80% damage buff, which is very large. So on cleave, it's going to feel much better. Currently, it's not working on alpha when I was testing it, but I'm excited for actually having I-beam feel like an impactful button again. Because Shadowlands I-beam was not it. It was very
It was so bad. In a world where you look at Shadowlands talents, if Blind Fury is the single target talent and Fellblade is the AoE talent, something has functionally gone wrong with your spec.
Yep.
Something's not
Well,
right.
there's a lot of indicators of that with Shadowlands Demon Hunter, but that's a couple of them.
One thing I'm actually really excited about thinking about the trees too is, like, throughout all of Shadowlands and especially the end of BFA, it's been constant high APM, very low hits. But if we're stacking crit and mastery, we're actually gonna have like a longer GCD, which feels bad to an extent, but we're gonna have hard hitting abilities. And
Yes.
that's something I definitely like. That's something I really liked about UBC, when it first got buffed in CN, when it was such a big amount of our damage. And it's going to be nice having a few different abilities that feel like they hit that hard.
Yeah,
It'll be nice having... Go ahead.
The only counterpoint to that is any build that incorporates Blind Fury into it is going to feel extremely bad with that low level of haste.
That is true.
I think that's less true now that I-beam does damage again.
It's
if you're standing
more-
there
it's
for
more
3
the,
seconds pressing it and it actually does damage, it might not feel as bad.
It's more the root than anything else. I don't like being rooted in place for that long.
Without cycle, when you don't feel like you need to press it on cooldown quite as hard, it's also less toxic in that sense, where you can plan around standing somewhere for 3 seconds. But yeah, I definitely do feel that.
I'm just excited for hopefully our actual abilities that we press with our own fingers dealing damage.
Yep.
So just a thought before we end this. In terms of tier bonuses, how hard do you think those are going to be to incorporate with all of these different moving parts now?
I think so. I think it makes it easier.
Yeah, no, there's
Like,
just
way
so many
easier.
ways they can go.
Yeah.
It felt like they were really restricted. They couldn't do anything for us in, Sepulchre. Like, what do? They just buffed up, what was it originally? Just Blade Dance, and then gave us, like, a Blade Dance reset.
Yeah,
And
every
then
time,
they-
every
Yeah,
5
doesn't
blade
do damage, we
dances.
don't want that.
And then they changed it because everybody started crying. They wanted a shorter meta cooldown. And when they changed it, and then it made it worse because once they realized that your meta cooldown being shorter doesn't actually do
big
anything
moment.
for you, then there you are. Like, it's just the original version of our Sepulchre tier set would have been much better, I think, in the long run than the one that we have now.
I think it's really difficult to make tier bonuses off of 2 abilities.
Yeah,
That's the long and short of it.
I think this talent tree like opens up so many possibilities.
I think that the other thing, my expectation is that the first tier sets are going to be extremely basic in what they accomplish. I mean, I'm talking like Tomb of Sargeras, or not Tomb of Sargeras, but Nighthold tier, where it's like your crit or your Chaos Strike just crits X% more, or you have X% more crit after using this ability. I don't think that they're going to be extremely unique and interesting until we've had a tier to
And
play
even
around with the talents. Yeah.
They'll probably be more rudimentary. That definitely makes sense because they might be a little bit scared of what will actually happen with all the classes and the interactions with tier sets and the new talents and stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't be
even with
surprised if
something-
that were the way.
Even with something that basic now, that at least ties into the kit, even if it's like giving mastery or it's giving crit, like that's something we can feel good about, especially in Windows. Like we can make use of that now, and that wasn't true in Shadowlands. It didn't feel like it, at least. So even something more basic like that, I think will feel better.
Yeah, I think it's something even like super simple on the surface could look simple, but in reality, it could have so many more layers to it. Like if there's something that's affecting Immolation Aura, that's directly going to feed into Ragefire and everything else attached to it. So yeah, you guys are absolutely right. There's a lot of possibilities now. Yeah, I think we're good there. Does anyone else have anything to add before we close up shop here? I'll add one thing. I think they should change.
Nerf Moonkin.
Yeah, nerf Moonkin.
Yep.
Don't tell Tettles. We should change the name of this talent from Soul Rend to something else because we already have.
Scuffed Bloodlet.
Yeah,
Bloodlet.
Bloodlet. We already have Soul Rending. This is Soul Rend. It doesn't make sense. Change it to something else.
Just make it original Bloodlet. There you go. Easy.
I think something we didn't touch on that's still in there is Serrated Glaive. I would kind of like Serrated Glaive to be removed, and
Yeah.
if it was something like, what was one of the effects that buffed up Bloodlet a lot in the past? It was like increased damage per bounce target.
Morg Bionic. Well, I don't want to hype speculate, but that one Throwglaive talent they added, who knows what that could be? Yeah,
It's
I
true.
mean,
But
That's true.
as it stands, like, at the very least, Serrated Glaive feels like it should be in a spot where you can only take it after you've taken Fel Bombardment, because that is such a bad button without Fel Bombardment.
It also, the tooltip on it doesn't read as a duration. I was confused initially. I had to take the talent to see if it actually has a duration or not. Because if it didn't have a duration, it was just a debuff on your target permanently, like it would maybe be a little bit more interesting. But yeah, it's just a 10-second debuff. It's just
Although if you think
very
of
weird.
bosses, that would have been even less interesting. You just throw a glaive
Yeah.
on the hole and
Yeah.
you're good.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, guys. It's been fun. Maybe we'll do this again later on, maybe closer to actual release. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of changes leading up to that and lots more for us to talk about. So thank you for joining. Big thanks to Radar.io for hosting this on their front page. And thanks to everyone for watching. And yeah, see you next time.